right now at this point of his life, he's a one-read thrower. It's the first guy's open, okay, great, I'll throw it. Ooh, the first guy's not open. I'm not sure what he's going to do after that.
People who say he can't get off number one, don't. Once they say that, stop listening to them.
It's a process in which every prospect in this draft, especially the quarterbacks, are taken apart by every front office, and they're taken apart publicly.
And as for Justin Fields, the thing that I think is most stressful is we saw him being the only quarterback that it felt like that is plummeting while all the other quarterbacks are skyrocketing.
One, I have heard that he is a last guy in, first guy out type of quarterback, like not the maniacal work ethic.
And Ryan, I will be honest with you, I haven't watched one lick of tape outside of the highlights I see on NFL Network. I don't know what I'm looking at.
Like, how do I phrase this the right way? Like, where is his desire to go be a great quarterback?
Draft season is mentally exhausting. One of the weirdest, or honestly one of the most bullshit narratives to pop up during this entire offseason, either before the draft or after the draft, is that Justin Fields is a raw quarterback prospect. I've seen some people say that he's not ready to play as a rookie because he doesn't know how to read defenses and play from the pocket. Typical garbage that people are spewing when they put on a single cut up against Indiana and call it a day. You know who you are. And so I wanted to put out a very special video this week to explain, using both data and film study, how A, Justin Fields can and will improve the Bears offense by orders of magnitude in 2021. And B, I want to explain how this targeted pre-draft narrative around Fields was complete nonsense, and why, in my opinion, at least based on what we look for in a modern quarterback, he's actually one of the more pro-ready prospects to come out in the last several years. Be forewarned though, if you are a Bears fan, we're going to be looking at a lot of Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles tape today to kind of demonstrate the difference between a bad quarterback and a good quarterback. So now would be a good time to go grab yourself a drink. It's going to be a long show. But with that, let's begin. The biggest problem by far with the Bears offense in recent years has been a lack of explosive plays. In particular, explosive passes are any pass that gets more than 20 yards, and an explosive run is any run that gets more than 15 yards. And the Bears just so happen to be ranked 32nd and 29th in the league in generating those explosive plays over the last two seasons, respectively. Jonathan Wood, who's a great Bears analyst I know, did a case study last year on the correlation between explosive plays and points scored per game, as well as explosive plays and offensive DVOA, and he found that teams that could get these big chunks of yardage all at once, rather than through slower, more methodical marches down the field with long drives, those more explosive teams were far more likely to be elite in terms of offensive production. And I know that sounds really obvious on the surface, but consider this. Even offenses that had a lot of negative plays like sacks or runs that get tackled for loss really didn't get slowed down at all as long as they got tons of explosive plays to go with those losses. Which is why hyper-aggressive but sometimes very streaky teams like the Chiefs, Bucks, Bills, and Titans tended to put up tons of points per game because they can score quickly with chunk plays either on the ground or through the air. It didn't matter how many negative plays they had as long as they could get big chunks all at once, and as a result of that explosiveness, they could all go on these massive scoring streaks in a short period of time and basically take over a game in a single half, or in KC's case, a single quarter. The Bears, meanwhile, straight up sucked at generating explosive plays over the last 2 years. As I mentioned before, they were ranked at the bottom of the league in those categories, and they were bad at being explosive for really a variety of reasons. For starters, Mitch Trubisky was arguably the worst explosive passer in the entire league last year. He completed only 18% of his deep throws in 2020, which is almost shockingly bad, and he threw only 2 deep touchdowns while doubling that in deep interceptions. His deep ball placement in particular was his main issue when trying to push the ball down the field, and he was constantly either underthrowing or overthrowing receivers. Now, he's always had some mechanical issues here and there that I felt contributed to his inconsistent accuracy, but even by his standards, last season was horrifically bad. However, even beyond those accuracy struggles, he even had worse issues when trying to just straight up keep drives alive on third downs, regardless of the yards to go, because for whatever reason, still in year 4 of his career, he struggled to process defenses and get the ball out on time before windows closed. I remember one interception in particular against the Falcons back in week 3 where they showed him kind of an exotic front and then bailed out of it at the snap into a basic Tampa 2 look against mesh, and that mesh also had a divide route down the middle acting as a way to clear the Mike linebacker, but Trubisky just straight up didn't know what he was looking at. It's a pretty basic coverage that the Falcons run all the time, they just happen to get into it out of a really exotic look for once, and because they got into it out of an exotic look, Trubisky just straight up short-circuited. He panicked, he didn't know what to do, and so he tried to check it down to a shallow cross without even looking at what was in front of him, and the nickel was literally waiting for the ball the entire time for an easy interception. This pick was classic Trubisky, and I don't want to harp on him too much because honestly I'm not telling Bears fans anything they don't already know, but I need to illustrate how inept Chicago's passing game was last season with Mitch under center, and how, to a degree, it wasn't really Matt Nagy's fault. After all, Nagy should expect as a head coach that his quarterback will be able to go through his progressions on mesh against Tampa 2 of all coverages. That's not that hard of an ask for 90% of NFL quarterbacks, but at least last year, he could not rely on his starter to actually do that, which is why Trubisky was promptly benched for the next 6 games after that interception was thrown. He just wasn't reliable. However, an unintended consequence of that benching of Trubisky for Nick Foles was that Trubisky no longer being on the field had a massive negative impact on the Bears' run game. And full disclosure, it's not like the Bears had an elite explosive run game even with Mitch on the field, but it was at least average to above average because of the benefits that his mobility provided. But with Foles now under center, that explosive 15-plus yard rush productivity dropped to damn near 0. Now, to be fair, their offensive line was banged up at that time, and they were using a new starting 5 combination pretty much every single week in that middle stretch of the season, but without the benefit of being able to run zone reads or options with Trubisky to kind of even up the numbers in the run game and give the offense a built-in advantage that they desperately needed with that injured offensive line, the run game completely fell apart. It was not until the final third of the season, when Trubisky was reinserted into the lineup and when the offensive line was slightly stabilized, that the run game finally came back to life. Because, let's be honest, the threat of Trubisky's athleticism gives the offense a built-in numbers advantage with the run that Nick Foles cannot and will not ever replicate. The ability to take away a guy like J.J. Watt, for example, just by having Trubisky ride the mesh point and threaten to pull the ball, that forces the rest of the defense to be perfect and for everyone else to win their one-on-ones just to get a stop. And it's really, really hard for an entire front 7 to all win their one-on-ones every single rep. All it takes is one guy making a mistake against a zone read and it's a big play. Like Zach Cunningham making the mistake of trying to backdoor a block here that he really should not have. And that explosive element on the ground, even as a decoy, is why Nagy favored putting Trubisky's athleticism on the field. It benefited the run-pass balance of his offense as a whole. Whether it was keepers off a naked bootleg, or even just the threat of a keeper freezing an edge defender just long enough to open up a crease for David Montgomery, that dynamic rushing element of a quarterback matters. And when the Bears were starting Foles, they no longer had that. So their offense struggled to really get anything going at all. Now, beyond the 2 major problems of the Bears not having an explosive passing game with Mitch Trubisky and not having an explosive run game with Nick Foles, the Bears offense had another major issue, which is that regardless of which one of those 2 was actually starting the game, the Bears offense really struggled to succeed on what I like to call second phase plays. And by that, I mean that when a play broke down in the first phase, or the designed phase of a play, neither Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles were really equipped to rescue that play from failure and make something out of nothing, either with an improvised throw on the run or a scramble or something in between. For example, in that same Jaguars game that I just mentioned late in the season, where Mitch's mobility played a big factor in the effectiveness of the run game down in the red zone, he had another play that broke down on him in the red zone area, and to his credit, he was able to use his athleticism to kind of keep it alive and get to that phase 2 opportunity. But in that phase 2 of the play is where the accuracy and decision-making issues that I mentioned earlier popped up once again. He had Allen Robinson one-on-one near the back pylon and wanted to hit him while on the move, which is objectively a good idea. Allen Robinson is a great jump ball receiver after all, but he just straight up missed on the throw. Rather than putting that ball high and outside at the pylon for a contested catch opportunity, he hung it low and inside towards the pursuit of the rest of the defense where it got picked off. It was yet another example of Trubisky almost getting it done in a critical spot and almost looking like a franchise quarterback, but in the end, coming up short. But I will say this, to his credit, when Trubisky was in the game, at least the Bears could get to that second phase on broken plays in the first place. You compare that to when Foles was starting, and they basically had no shot of getting anything positive if the initial design of the play didn't work, because Foles just can't move. If someone missed a block or if nobody got open on their designed routes, the play was functionally dead in the water because Foles is just not mobile enough to extend it and give it new life. There's a good example of that from the Titans game where Tennessee showed a single high safety coverage before the snap, but then rotated a 2 high safety coverage post-snap, and Darnell Mooney made a somewhat predictable rookie mistake on what's called a basic route in most West Coast playbooks these days, and a basic route is a speed cut at a 10-yard depth and rolling it to 12 yards. Mooney was supposed to convert this basic into a post against a 2-high defensive structure and just kind of attack that void in the middle of the coverage, but instead he just flattened down and continued to run that basic straight into the linebackers, who were all using what's called a robot technique to gain depth and get into the passing window. Now, at this point, Foles knew that this play had not gone as designed. Mooney screwed it up, he's young, that happens from time to time, it is what it is, but now with phase 1 being a failure, it's theoretically on Foles as the quarterback to transition to phase 2 and just make a play when things break down. And this was Nick's biggest issue as a Bears quarterback by far. He could not get to phase 2. All of the linebackers have their backs turned to him, the field side corner isn't looking at him either, and he has yards and yards of green grass in front of him to take off and make a play, but he's just too damn slow. Foles got 2 yards on this play, only 2, and that is the reality of having an immobile quarterback in the modern NFL. Other than the very few exceptions out there like Tom Brady or later stage Drew Brees, if your quarterback can't move or can't accurately throw while on the move to make something out of nothing, then your offense is destined to fail, period. And unfortunately for the Bears, at least, they were forced to live through that reality during all of last season. That lack of playmaking ability, that lack of deep ball accuracy, that lack of mobility, and all of the things that mobility can do to augment a successful running game, that absence of dynamic quarterback play is what really killed the Bears offense over the last couple of years. However, when you look at Justin Fields' skill set and all of the dynamic ability that he brings to the table in the future, he actually kind of fixes every single problem that the Bears offense has. And I'll explain exactly how he's going to fix those problems right after I thank this week's sponsor, Raycon. You've probably already heard of them before because Raycon's kind of taken over the wireless earbud industry over the last few years, and you see people a lot bigger than me like Snoop and Mike Tyson promoting them as well, but just in case you haven't already found them, Raycon earbuds are designed to be the best premium earbuds on the market that are not overpriced just for the sake of branding like some other companies out there. They start at about half the cost of many other premium brands, but they still have the same amazing audio quality, 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, fantastic bass, and many customizable fittings for different ear sizes that won't fall out or compromise any noise isolation. Plus, Raycons come with a ton of different color and pattern options so you can get whichever ones fit your personal style. They even come with a 45-day return policy if you don't like them, so you can try them out and see how you feel. It's summer now, so I've been using them a ton on the hiking trails attached to my neighborhood, and because they don't have any wires and they're not catching on passing plants and branches and stuff, that means I'm always comfortable no matter where I'm at. If you're looking for high-quality Bluetooth earbuds that won't break your wallet, go to buyraycon.com/Brett for 15% off your order. Again, that is buyraycon.com/Brett down in the description below for a 15% discount. Now, let's go over what Justin Fields does well, what he brings to the table in this Bears offense, and how it kind of fits with what Matt Nagy wants in a quarterback. And also, let's talk a little bit about why I think he actually might improve the Bears by a massive amount, honestly, maybe as early as this season. When you look at Justin Fields' skill set, he fills every single individual hole that both Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles had in their own skill sets combined. For starters, he has the ability to work through progressions quickly on basically every concept you can throw at him. Ohio State ran everything from stuff like Y-cross and of course mesh, which are staple air raid concepts, to things like Hank or weak side flood off a bootleg, which are both staple West Coast concepts. They even ran a healthy dosage of 4 verts, which can trace itself all the way back to those late 70s, early 80s BYU teams that completely innovated the modern passing game. And by the way, I highly suggest that you go check out the History of the Spread Offense video that I just put out recently, which I think is going to help explain some of the stuff that I'm talking about here, and just kind of the overall methodology of the Ohio State offense under Ryan Day, because getting some context on the history of that system, or rather systems plural, can help to show just how similar the 2019 and 2020 Buckeyes were to what the Bears will run in 2021 and beyond. Both offenses run basically everything under what I like to call the spread coast umbrella, because both of those systems in one way or another originated from the exact same spread and West Coast coaching trees, and so I have literally zero concerns about Fields' ability to step right into Matt Nagy's offense and have complete command. They won't really have to teach him anything new other than just some slight differences in verbiage, because he already knows all of the actual concepts themselves. Plus, as a bonus, not only has Fields already had to do it all as a passer, especially mentally, but physically he's somebody who can be a threat as a runner too, both in designed runs and on scrambles. For example, they run all of the same bash stuff at OSU that you see the Ravens do with Lamar Jackson, they just call it something different. Which I suppose on the surface you can trace that back to Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen at Florida with Tim Tebow, but in reality I would even go so far as to trace the origins of that rushing concept all the way back to the Veer offense under Bill Yeoman in the 60s, and Ohio State still does it today. They also ran a lot of zone read option, QB power, QB draw, and Fields handled all of that. He's a complete runner both inside and outside the tackles, and he's able to use his mobility to extend passing plays too, because he's a very capable thrower on the run. So not only can he improve the run game just by being a threat himself that defenses have to account for, a la Mitchell Trubisky, but he can win in the second phase areas as well and make something out of nothing as a passer, which no Bears quarterback has really been able to do since, I guess, prime Jay Cutler? Oh, and by the way, not only is he mobile and incredibly smart, but he was also literally the most accurate quarterback in all of college football too. My buddy Ben Solak from the Draft Network, who's a tremendous film analyst by the way, and you all need to go follow him immediately over on Twitter, he charted every single snap by hand himself that every single major draft eligible quarterback took last season. And in that charting effort, he found that not only did Fields make more throws beyond his first read in the concept than every other college quarterback, with 19% of his throws being to his second, third, or fourth read, but in those throws past his first read, he was also far more accurate with his ball placement than everyone else too, with an 88% catchable percentage and a 69% completion percentage, which was literally more than double Mac Jones's completion percentage past his first read. And not only that, but he had those insane accuracy metrics while also playing the hardest slate of defenses in the nation. 4 of his last 5 games were all against top 15 defenses in the country from Indiana, Northwestern, Clemson, and Alabama, and he did all of that against those teams while playing hurt. So this mystical narrative with a guy like Fields that he doesn't know how to read defenses, that he's not accurate, that he's not tough, that he's a run-first guy, that he's not a good leader, all of those things are not just easy to prove false with the slightest effort put into film study, and of course actually giving a shit about your job as an analyst, but they're also pretty easy to prove false with straight up data as well. I don't want to mince words here, it is flat out bullshit what Fields had to put up with during the pre-draft criticism cycle last spring, because you could argue that he had a more impressive resume than every other quarterback in this draft, and that includes Trevor Lawrence. He's got perfect recall, he's tough as nails, he already knows how to read basically every single concept that the Bears run because they both utilize mostly air raid and West Coast concepts. He's pinpoint accurate at every level of the field, he's unflappable in the pocket, and he's as dynamic as it gets as a runner. He is everything that both Trubisky and Foles are not simultaneously. I don't know how else to put this, but the Bears got kind of lucky that they were able to draft Justin Fields at 11 overall, because in most years he would not have been available that late. And I know that this video is getting really long now, and I apologize for that. And thank you to whoever is actually still here listening to me talk about a really bad Chicago Bears offense. I appreciate you guys sticking around this long, but I felt that it needed to be a long video because, for me at least, it's not just enough to say that Mitch Trubisky couldn't throw, or that Nick Foles couldn't run, or that Justin Fields is a good player. Those things are obvious, but I wanted to show how all of those things impacted the Bears offense and will impact the Bears offense, because I want to demonstrate that this team really was a quarterback away from being a really good offense. This is a perfect fit to me between prospect and team. It really is. And I'm thankful that he fell out of the top 10. I'm thankful that he went to Chicago, even though he lost millions of dollars by not going in the top 3 to 5 picks. Ultimately, in the long term, I think this is going to be better for his career because he went to a better organization with a better structure and a lot better supporting cast around him that will help him be successful in the long term. And in the end, that's really all I care about is Justin Fields being successful, because if he's good, that means the Bears are good. And if the Bears are good, that means my Sunday evenings this fall might finally at long last be slightly less depressing. But until then, I have a whole bunch more film rooms coming out pretty soon. I have other stuff going up on Instagram and TikTok, so follow me there to get some other different content that I'm trying to throw out there. Trying to diversify, what I do here, remain relevant for the youths of the world, I guess you can say. I'm 30 and I'm trying to learn TikTok, and it's going decent. But anyway, I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming, and then I have some other stuff that's happening for the channel that is absolutely massive that I can't quite talk about yet, but you'll know it when you see it. So until then, thank you all for watching. Thank you for being here for yet another NFL season starting up here in a couple months. I can't wait to see how far we go together this year. Again, I'll see you back here, same time, same place. Cheers.